All right, 6.7, we're talking about the distributive property. Now, the rule for distributive property, I'm going to give you the rule in the sense of without numbers, and then I will show you an example with numbers. So please don't, I don't understand. Well, just hang on, okay? The distributive property says this. If I had this expression, some number A times the parentheses B plus C, or some number B plus C, okay, that is the same thing, or that is equal to A times B plus A times C. Now, let me give you a number example. If I had this, 4, that was my A, 5 plus 7. That's my B, and that's my C. Okay? That expression is the same as, or equal to, the A, which is 4, times the B, which is 5, plus the A, which is the 4, times C, which is 7. Those two expressions are the same. Okay? Now, I'm sure you're saying, well, why don't I just take 5 plus 7 and then multiply it by 4? Okay? You can. But we have to learn the distributive property. The distributive property next to positive and negative numbers is probably the most important property you will learn for the next 4 or 5 years at least in mathematics. Okay? The reason being is because it is the basis for, for example, yesterday in Algebra 1, I used the distributive property probably 50% of the problems. Okay, and it wasn't a distributive property lesson. Okay, it was just a regular, we're in something totally different, and so you have to know the distributive property, and so therefore, for us to get into the more complicated distributive property problems, we have to start easy. Okay, so I'll give you a good example. I'm going to get one right out of the book here. All right. I'll give you an example of what they're going to want you to do. Okay? They're going to take and say 5 times 3 plus 7. Okay? And they're going to tell you to write an equivalent expression using the distributive property. Okay? So they want you to use the distributive property to create an equivalent expression. Okay? The distributive property means I distribute something on the outside to everything that's on the inside. Okay? That's what the distributive property is doing. It's distributing. If I had a big box of chocolate chip cookies and I distributed them to everyone in the room, that means I would hand them out to everybody in the room. Except Haley. Because Haley doesn't like chocolate chip cookies.
Yes, I do.
I was talking about Haley Perez.
Yes, I do.
Oh, my bad. All right, so don't panic. Don't panic. There are no cookies. Don't freak out. All right. Now, so what we're doing is we're distributing the 5, in this case, to the 3 and the 7. So that means we have this. 5 times 3 plus whatever this sign is, we bring it down. So if that was a minus sign, we would bring down the minus sign. And then you have 5 times 7. And this is the equivalent expression. That would be your answer. Okay? Now, we eventually will take it further than that, but that is the first step in using the distributive property. Taking whatever's on the outside of the parentheses and distributing it to everything inside the parentheses. Now, let's look at a problem that has subtraction in it. Let's say I had this problem. 8 times 100 minus 4. Okay? 8 times 100 minus 4. All right. We would take and distribute the 8 to both things inside the parentheses, both numbers inside the parentheses. So that would mean I would have 8 times 100, and the reason it's times is because there's no sign in between the 8 and the parentheses. If this was, let me give you an example. This was 8 plus parentheses 100 minus 4. You can't use the distributive property on that. Okay? Distributive property can't be used because of that sign right there. Okay, so those are not the same problems. All right, now, so we would have 8 times 100 minus 8 times 4. And that would be your answer. The reason that is your answer is because they're wanting an equivalent expression. Okay? That's why that is your answer. Okay? If they tell you to evaluate, let's say they gave us that same problem and they told us to evaluate it using the distributive property. Evaluate using, not used, using distributive property. Okay? If they told you to do that, it would be the same problem, 8 times 100 minus 4. So I would distribute the 8 to the 100 and to the 4. So 8 times 100 minus 8 times 4. Since we're using the word evaluate, then I have to go further with my steps. Okay, we just made an equivalent fraction or equivalent expression, and now I am going to take it to its simplest form. So I'm actually going to take 8 times 100, which is 800, minus 8 times 4, which is 32, and I'm going to subtract those two and get 768. Okay, so that is what you do when they tell you to evaluate the problem or the expression using distributive property. This right here is the distributive property. That's where we used the distributive property. Okay? So, here's why you got to have the distributive property. One of the many reasons, okay? But this is one that you will see in the next chapter. Okay? In the next chapter, they'll have a problem like this. Four times, parentheses, a plus 3. Okay? And they're not going to give you what a is. Okay? They're just telling you to simplify the problem. Well, to simplify that, then I have to do this. I have to distribute the 4 to both things inside the parentheses. Okay? So that means 4 times a plus 4 times 3. Now, can I take 4 times a? No, because we don't know what a is. So I just write 4a. Because anytime you have a number next to a variable, we've talked about this, anytime you have a number next to a variable, it means to multiply. You don't have to have the parentheses. Okay? Now, can I do 4 times 3? What is that? 12. So, That is simplified. Okay? Now, could I put the A and the 3 together inside the parentheses? We said what? Could we do that? Or can we do that? Huh? What? You can? No. Why can't we? Huh? It has to be... Okay, it seems like Coach Smith just said like 2 minutes ago, I wish I could rewind the tape. But I just said 2 seconds ago, we can't put A plus 3 together because we don't know what A is. Isn't that what I said? Okay. So since we don't know what A is here, we can't put it together. So we can't put 4A plus 12 together. It can't go together because we don't know what A is. And our PEMDAS is right up there on the board. We have to do multiplication before we do addition, right? So we have to do this part of the problem first. We can't because we don't know what A is, so we're done. Okay? So that's how you can simplify a problem when you don't necessarily know what all the values are. Okay? We will do that in the next chapter. I think it's section 3, if I remember right. Section 3 of the next chapter. Okay? So, one of the main reasons, but there's a lot more, because, like I said, you'll start it in 8th grade next year, regardless of which 8th grade math class you're in, you'll start it in Chapter 2, Distributive Property. Okay? So we've got to get it down. We covered it a little bit last year in 6th grade. Okay? So we're covering it more this year in 7th grade. Okay? But it's something we got to get down. You got to understand it. You got to learn it. Okay? Now, I want to show you something. See if I can find one here. I don't think they do any of these. Let me make sure. Yeah, they don't really do any of these in this part. I just want to show you. All right. Another place that you can let the distributive property help you. Okay? Let's say I had this. Let's say I had 22 times 98. Okay, 22 times 98. Now, most of you, if you had to do that problem, you'd have to, stick it on paper and you'd have to do this. 22, 98, and multiply it out. Correct? Okay. Most of you would have to do that. Now, I'm going to show you an easier way to do it, that you can hopefully do most of it, if all of it, in your mind. I'm going to write it down on the screen because obviously, you're not going to be able to see what's in my mind for you to look at it. Okay, now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this number right here, and I'm going to make an equivalent number. And that equivalent number is this. Okay, is 100 minus 2, 98. Yes, it is. Okay, now I'm going to bring my 22 right there. Now, I'm going to use the distributive property. And I'm going to distribute the 22 to both of those things. Okay, I'm going to take 22 times 100 minus 22 times 2. Okay. Now, what's 22 times 100? Well, that one's easy. You just take 22 and put 2 zeros after it. What's 2 times 22? 44. So now I'm just going to take 44, and what you're really doing, okay, what you're really doing is taking 44 away from 100. What is 44 minus 100? 300. What is 100 minus 44? What is 100 minus 44? Don't do it on paper. Don't do it on paper. Try to do it in your head. Try to do it in your head. Close, but no. No, don't just start yelling numbers. No, raise your hand. I don't want people yelling numbers at me. Okay? Think of it in this term. Put your hand down. This is, in your mind, these are the top things you can do to help yourself. Okay? No. Don't yell numbers at me. Listen to me. Put your hand down. Because I know when y'all raise your hand, your mind goes blank and you don't listen. Okay? 44, if we look at 44, it takes 6 to get to 50, right? From 44, it takes 6 more to get to 50, okay? So from 50 to get to 100, it's 50 more, right? So that means it's 56, okay? And so that would be 2,156, okay? So that's one way that you could do it. I'm going to show you that you've used the distributive property ever since you've started multiplying two-digit numbers. Okay? Here's another way that you can use the distributive property on this same problem. Okay? There's multiple ways to use the distributive property. The other way that you could use the distributive property with this problem is to say this. 98 times 20 plus 2. Is 20 plus 2 22? It is. Okay? So, if I distribute that times each other, that would be 98 times 20 plus 98 times 2. Okay? This one's not as easy. I'll give you that. Okay, but it can be. 98 times 20 is the same thing as 98 times 2, but I just put a 0 at the end. So 98 times 2 is 16, carry my 1. 2 times 9 is 18 plus 1. 196, add the 0. So 98 times 2 has to be 196. Okay? Now, granted, this one's a little bit more difficult to add it in your head. Okay, and I would not normally divide this problem up like I did here. I just want to show you that you've used the distributive property. But basically, that's 6, 5, 0, 2. Nope, missed 1. That's a 1, my bad. 2156. Okay, did we get the same two answers? Okay, distributive property works many different ways. Now, I want to show you that you've been using the distributive property. You just didn't know it. Let's go back to this problem up here, 98 times 22, and do it the way you would have normally done it. Okay, 2 times 8 is 6, carry my 1. 2 times 9 is 18 plus 1, 196, bring down your 0. Okay, 2 times 8, once again, is 6, 9, 1. You get 2156. Now, let's look at this. 196, 196. 1960, 1960. So you have basically been using the distributive property, you just didn't realize it. Okay? But we're going to use it to try to make things a little simpler than this type of problem. All right? This problem over here was a little easier because I manipulated the numbers better over on the left side than we did on the right side. Okay, so let's look at one that can really help you. All right, let's look at this one. 11 times 5 over 8 plus 11 times 3 over 8. Okay, now, don't start doing the problem, because I'm going to show you an easy way to do it. If you don't know the distributive property, most of you would do what to solve this? What would be your first step? Do what? No, hang on. If you don't know the distributive property, if you just saw 11 times 5 eighths plus 11 times 3 eighths, you would just take 11 times the fraction and 3 times the fraction, right? Or 11 times the 5 eighths, 11 times the 3 eighths. Then you would do it wrong.
I would add the parentheses first.
What parentheses? There are no parentheses there. That's multiplication. No, you can't just randomly add those things up together.
But what about, you can't add 5/8 and then 3/8?
Well, I'm fixing to show you. The distributive property, a while ago we said A times B plus A times C was the result of A times B plus C. Okay, we said that just a second ago. Okay, well, let's look at something. This A means the same number is used there and there, right? Isn't this and this the same number? So it can go outside my parentheses like that does. Inside the parentheses, you have the 5/8 plus 3/8. Now, what's 5/8 plus 3/8? 8/8, which is 1. So you have 11 times 1, which is 11. Okay? So that's another way that the distributive property can make it easier on you. Okay? Now, let's look at decimals. 3 times 10.4. Okay, most of you would just have to multiply that out on paper, do it that way. Easy way to do it is this way. I'm going to take this and divide it into two parts. I'm going to say 3 times 10 plus 0.4. No, that's 10 plus.
No, on the top where it's highlighted.
Oh, that's 3 times parentheses 10.4. Yeah. All right. Not complicated. I just made one of them a whole number, the other one a decimal. Now I use the distributive property. 3 times 10 plus 3 times 0.4. 3 times 10 is what? 30. You can do that in your head. Plus 3 times 0.4. Well, 3 times 4 is what? 12. I've got one decimal place, so it's 1.2. Now, you just put those two things together. 31.2.
30, yeah.
That's it. Okay. Now, a lot of the times y'all are always talking to me about, y'all are saying stuff like, how do you multiply so quickly? Well, most of the time when I'm multiplying, in my mind, I'm using the distributive property. I'm just breaking it up into easier parts that I can do in my head. Okay? I'll give you a great example. See if I can think of one. Well, if you had, like, for example, 312 times 12. I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do that one. See, that one there, you could do one of two ways. Okay? You could take 12 times 300 plus 12. Mm-hmm. Okay, you could do that and say, okay, 12 times 300 and then plus 12 times 12. Well, 12 times 3 is 36, and I put 2 zeros at the end. Plus 12 times 12 is 144. And you get 3,744. Okay? Another way that you use the distributive property, and it helps you. Okay? Now, I want you to do this one on your own, using your distributive property. 3 times 7.3 plus 3 times 2.7. should already be done if you're using the distributive property. Wow, should already be done. Look, 3 times 7.3 plus 2.7. Those two things equal 10. 3 times 10, 30. You got 57? You got it wrong. All right, now, tomorrow, we will do two things. We will review for your test that you're going to have on Friday, test number 2, and that will be over 6.1 through 6.5. And we will start on our homework 6.7, 1 through 22. Okay? This will be due on Monday. Obviously, you do not do it for homework tonight because we don't have homework. Okay? You'll end up doing it either Thursday night or Friday or over the weekend. But Friday, we will have a test over 6.1 through 6.5. Okay? Adding, subtracting negatives and positives and multiplying and dividing negatives and positives. Okay? You may go.